My name is Mike Riley. I'm Director of Sciencelogic's European operation. Sciencelogic is a software company focused on the performance and availability of IT infrastructure and the business services that run across that infrastructure, whether hosted in your own data center or in a public cloud service such as Amazon Web Services or Windows Azure. We've seen a great deal of change in the European marketplace as public sector organizations and enterprises put more trust into public cloud services. Even over the last 12 months, there's been a sea change in the acceptance of using public cloud services, particularly with the adoption of the G-Cloud framework. There are still, though, fears over the security and the perceived lack of control that can come from deploying critical business applications into a public cloud. Service providers and enterprises require comfort that they can still deliver and receive the same amount of visibility and transparency into their business services, no matter where they're hosted, whether it's in the cloud or in their own data center. With respect to trust and transparency, this is one of the fundamental issues that Sciencelogic can help companies to address. Cloud providers and enterprise organizations, through the use of Sciencelogic's multi-tenant IT infrastructure monitoring solution, are able to gain a single pane of glass view into the business applications that are running, whether they're running their own data center, hosted in public cloud, and whether they traverse network, applications, virtualization, or storage.
My name is Antonio Pirana. I'm the CTO of Sciencelogic. When most people think about cloud computing, they think about Apple, or Facebook, or Twitter. And as we get more into the corporate cycle and a bit more sophisticated, we start hearing about Google and Amazon Web Services and Microsoft, or even perhaps my internal private cloud, which has really become the modern day nomenclature for your internal IT environment. And cloud computing is more than just the flavor du jour. To think about it in that way is to really preclude yourself from massive opportunities, but perhaps even more dramatically, you're going to get yourself into a position of mass wastage financially. Now, it sounds dramatic, but what I really mean by that is consider the fact that today in large organizations and large enterprises, we're reaching a point where at least 50% of corporate budgets are now being spent on IT or IT-related functions. So what that means is, at the end of the day, if you're spending all this money on IT, yet at the same time we're seeing budgets being squeezed and IT being asked to do more with less, it's natural that they're starting to look for a new place to host that IT. Enter the consumerization of IT, as we know it in the consumer sector. So businesses too are looking to be able to absorb and use their business productivity IT applications in a useful way day to day. And that's really what the cloud represents. How do I do this in an agile way? Not necessarily a cost-effective way always. You have to be very careful in that regard. And that's where it becomes very, very important to understand the costs of cloud computing. It can be a dramatic failing point for many people who are not paying attention. And it is really something that you have to be sure that your service provider is giving you that adequate visibility into what your costs are going to be. If not, then perhaps your billing software vendor or perhaps your monitoring and management tool as well. But you do have to paying attention all the time. What are those costs going to be? At the end of the day, what I'm genuinely finding is that most people are not moving to cloud computing necessarily for the initial financial benefit, or at least not beyond the capex to operational expenditure, but it's much more so for the agility that it offers you at the end of the day. And the agility that it offers your consumers, the agility and the flexibility and the new tool sets that it then offers your IT departments, and more importantly, if you don't do it, your competitors are going to run away with the market. Because organizations today who don't want to get beaten by what the cloud offers need to start having a serious cloud strategy that is more than just test and development, and more than just saying, oh, this is a palatable option. No, it's a necessary option for you to consider. So security in the cloud is no longer a stumbling block. It is a discussion point, and certainly a serious one, depending on what you're putting into the cloud, for sure. But I think the more apropos discussion today for the IT manager is really to start considering the performance metrics of what he is putting into the cloud, right? What expectations do you have? What key performance metrics do you have? How measurable are they? And what are you expecting from your cloud service provider? Because today's cloud service provider should be providing you with a service level agreement and terms and conditions that are no longer generic and used in yesteryear. So we know that you want more control and visibility into your cloud assets, for sure. But do you rely purely on your service provider to do so, or do you also rely on your legacy management systems that you've had for many years in your IT department? And nobody simply wants to rip and replace. It can be expensive, it can take a lot of time to do so, but it's important to understand that even the monitoring and management systems from the mainframe era clearly never leapt the chasm to make it into the client-server model. And by the same token, that client-server model that you've had in place for many years now, the tools necessary to manage them are no longer going to be adequate in this era of cloud computing, where things are far more volatile, far more fluid, far more fast-moving, far more scalable at the end of the day. Therefore, automation is critical. This is something we've concentrated on in focusing our minds every day on how to modernize that IT operations practice. Automation is a key part of that in everything we do. So we're moving away from just the requirements of bigger and better and faster in the cloud space to how do I make my operations smarter? A concept that we call smart IT. And it should be something everyone is focused on today. So I would say two major considerations at the end of the day to think about for big organizations when moving to the cloud today. First, involve every senior executive in your organization in that cloud strategy, because it's going to involve all of them and it's going to touch all of them. And that's how you're going to get your best cloud strategy in place today. And the second thing is, don't assume that everything is going to just move to the cloud. I think it's perfectly reasonable to understand that not everything will immediately move to the cloud. It will happen over time, and we don't expect everybody to move everything to the cloud. The future is a hybrid cloud. In other words, using both your internal IT environments and your external environments. The trick is how to get that balance right, and to get that balance right, you really have to have intelligent tools in place today that are fairly holistic in nature and give you that entire visualization of your IT options.
So whether or not you're considering taking critical applications into the cloud, come and talk to Sciencelogic. We'll be happy to demonstrate our award-winning software and show you how to modernize your IT operations.